Hey everyone, today we're going to journey deep into the tropical rainforest, but we're going way beyond just looking at the amazing plants and animals. We're going to uncover the invisible connections that hold it all together, this incredible, living, breathing web of interdependence. So it really all boils down to one huge question. How does a rainforest actually stay alive? I mean, with so much life packed in, so much competition for resources, how does this ridiculously complex system not just survive, but actually thrive? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. Okay, so we're going to tackle this story in four main parts. We'll kick things off with climate and decomposition. Then we'll dive into the soil and nutrient cycling. After that, we'll bring in the animals. And finally, we'll look at the human connection to it all. You'll see how each part just perfectly builds on the last, kind of like the rainforest itself. First up, climate and decomposition. You gotta understand, this is the absolute foundation of the entire system. Seriously, everything, and I mean everything, starts right here. Just picture the rainforest climate like a giant natural greenhouse. It's always warm, it's always humid, there's always moisture in the air. And these conditions, this constant heat and wetness, are the absolute perfect recipe for life to just explode. And here's the really critical thing that happens because of that climate. When things fall to the forest floor, leaves, branches, even animals, they don't just sit there for long. That heat and moisture means everything breaks down and it happens incredibly fast. And what you get from that rapid breakdown is this stuff, humus. It's a really thin but super, super rich layer of soil that's just packed with all the nutrients from that dead material. This is basically the rainforest's lifeblood. It's the power-packed meal for everything trying to grow. Okay, so we've got all these amazing nutrients sitting in that humus layer on the forest floor. But where do they go from there? Well, that brings us to the engine of the ecosystem, the soil, and how those nutrients get moved around. Now, get ready for this, because it's probably the biggest surprise about the rainforest. You'd think with all that lush green life, the soil would be incredibly deep and fertile, right? Nope. It's actually the opposite. The soil underneath that thin humus layer is really, really poor. The richness isn't in the ground itself, it's in the speed of the cycle. And this little diagram shows that cycle perfectly. It's such a tight, efficient loop. You see, plants slurp up the nutrients with their shallow roots, then they die and fall. The decomposers get to work instantly, breaking it all down, and boom, those nutrients are put right back on the surface for the next plant to use. It is the ultimate recycling system, and it happens at lightning speed. So let's give a shout out to the real heroes of this story, the decomposers. We're talking about fungi, bacteria, all the tiny organisms doing the heavy lifting. They're the engine of the engine. They're breaking everything down and making sure not a single nutrient goes to waste. I'm telling you, without them, the whole forest would just grind to a halt. And this is why it all matters so much. The system is incredibly efficient, but man, is it fragile. If you take away the trees, say through deforestation, that rapid cycle is shattered. There are no more leaves to fall, the sun bakes the ground, and the rain washes away that precious thin layer of humus. You're just left with that poor soil underneath, and it becomes totally useless, really, really fast. All right, so we've got our foundation of climate and the engine of the nutrient cycle. Now let's add the next amazing layer, the animals. See, they aren't just living in the rainforest, they all have a job to do. Let's take monkeys, for example. As they're swinging through the canopy, eating fruits, they're actually carrying seeds far, far away from the parent tree. They're basically the forest's gardeners, planting the next generation of trees without even realizing it. Pretty cool, huh? Then you've got your predators, like the incredible harpy eagle. By hunting animals like monkeys and sloths, they keep those populations in check. This makes sure that no single species gets too dominant and eats up all the resources. It keeps the whole ecosystem in a healthy balance. And it's not just about the big, flashy animals. Smaller creatures, like this poison dart frog, are a super critical link in the food chain. They eat insects, controlling their numbers, and they, in turn, become food for larger animals. Every single creature is a vital connection in the web. So the crucial point here is that this is a total two-way street.
Of course, the animals need the plants for food and a place to live. But what's amazing is that the plants also desperately need the animals for things like pollination and spreading their seeds. And hey, even their waste is important. It puts valuable nutrients right back into that rapid cycle we were just talking about.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most complex piece of this web of us, people. Humans have been a part of the rainforest ecosystem for thousands of years, and our connection to it is, well, it's profound.
You know, for many indigenous communities, the rainforest is literally everything. It's their grocery store for fruits and nuts, their pharmacy for healing plants, and their hardware store for building materials. They have this deep, generational knowledge of how to use its resources for everything they need to survive. And this really highlights two totally different ways of interacting with the forest. On one hand, you have indigenous communities who have traditionally lived in harmony with the ecosystem, understanding its limits and taking only what they need. But on the other hand, you have large-scale activities like commercial logging, farming, and mining. These often break that delicate nutrient cycle we talked about and can cause massive damage to the entire web. So, as we've seen, from the climate creating the perfect conditions, to the soil rapidly cycling the nutrients, to the animals and people playing their parts, the single most important thing to take away from all this is simple. In the rainforest, everything is connected.
Which leaves us with one last question to think about. The rainforest is a strong, resilient system, for sure, but its strength comes from this beautiful, intricate web of connections. So, if you pull on just one of those threads, whether it's a species of frog, the decomposers in the soil, or the trees themselves, what happens to the rest of the web?